Have you ever heard of the old house in the forest? The one at the end of the trail, hidden between the twisted trees? They say that many years ago, it was the home of a happy family, until a tragedy turned the place into a nightmare. Today, no one dares to get close. But, of course, there are always those who love a challenge. It was a cold October night when three friends, João, Carlos, and Ana, decided to explore the house. They had always been fascinated by horror stories, and, after hearing so many accounts, they decided to see for themselves if the house was really haunted. They arrived around 11 p.m. The full moon lit the path, and the cold wind made the leaves whisper ancient secrets. The house was exactly as people described. Old, with broken windows, and the wood creaked with every step. João, always the bravest, was the first to enter. Carlos and Ana followed him, though hesitantly. Inside, the air was heavy and smelled of mold. The walls were covered in graffiti and marks that looked like they had been made by desperate nails. They started to explore the place, moving from room to room, until they reached the basement. They said the basement was the epicenter of all the paranormal activity. They decided to go down, and each step seemed heavier than the last. When they finally reached the bottom, they found an old chest covered in dust. Curious, they opened the chest and found a diary. It was the diary of a girl named Isabel, who had lived in that house. On the first pages, she described the family's happiness, the sunny days in the garden, and cozy nights by the fireplace. But as they kept reading, things started to get strange. Isabel talked about a presence in the house, something dark that whispered her name at night and that she saw out of the corner of her eye. Her parents thought it was just her imagination, until her mother started seeing it too. The whispers turned into screams, and the family began to lose their sanity. The last entry in the diary was from a stormy night. Isabel wrote that the presence was stronger than ever, and that she was afraid of what might happen. The words were shaky, as if she were writing in a hurry. After that, the diary ended abruptly. As the friends were reading, a cold wind swept through the basement, and the door slammed shut with a bang. They were left in the dark, only with João's dim flashlight. Suddenly, they heard a whisper. It seemed to come from all sides at once. Ana began to cry, saying she wanted to leave, but the door wouldn't open. The whispers turned into screams, and João's flashlight went out. In the total darkness, they felt cold hands touching them, pulling them, trying to drag them to the bottom of the basement. Carlos, panicking, managed to find the lighter in his pocket. When he lit it, he saw the figure of a girl in the corner, looking at them with empty eyes. Isabel. Somehow they managed to open the door and ran outside, not looking back. The house became silent again, as if nothing had happened. But the three friends were never the same. They swear that sometimes they still hear the whispers at night, calling their names. So, if you ever decide to visit that old house in the forest, think twice. Maybe Isabel is still waiting for you. After their desperate escape, João, Carlos, and Ana ran through the forest without stopping, without looking back. The biting wind and the sound of dry leaves under their feet seemed to amplify their sense of panic. They knew that no matter how fast they ran, they were still deep in the forest and far from home. But the fear of returning to the house, now with Isabel watching them, drove them forward without question. They reached a clearing where the moonlight seemed stronger, and began to rest, panting and exhausted. But as they settled down, something strange happened. The sudden calm was broken by a sound, a faint whisper, but clear. They looked at each other, trying to identify where it was coming from, but saw nothing. The whisper continued, and it seemed to be getting closer with each second. Carlos was the first to speak. "Are you guys hearing this?" Ana and João nodded, but neither of them could say a word. The whisper seemed to transform into words, but the sentences were distorted, as if they were being spoken by someone underground, distant, but at the same time very close. Suddenly, the sound stopped. The silence in the forest was absolute, as if the very air had stopped. But soon, the sound of footsteps began to approach. Light footsteps, but firm, as if someone was walking among the trees, right next to them. João, with his heart racing, looked at his friends. "It can't be, we left the house. What else could be following us?" Carlos, without thinking twice, grabbed the flashlight and began to shine it around the area. The shadows of the trees stretched in strange ways, as if they were moving on their own. Suddenly, the flashlight went out by itself, plunging them into total darkness. Anna, who was already visibly nervous, began to cry softly, her eyes fixed on the direction of the trees. She felt a presence, a force that was there, between them, watching. João tried to calm her down, telling her it was just fear taking over her mind, but he himself didn't believe what he was saying. It was then, in the pitch-black night, that a figure appeared before them. A girl. No, she wasn't an ordinary girl. Her face was pale, with empty, piercing eyes, and black hair falling over her face. She said nothing, but her fixed gaze seemed to be searching for something, as if waiting for a response. The figure was Isabel, the same one they had seen in the house. João, terrified, took a step back. "Isabel?" he asked, his voice trembling. The girl didn't answer. She just pointed to the forest to her left, and with supernatural speed, vanished between the trees, leaving behind a trail of dark smoke that surrounded them. The air became dense and hard to breathe. Carlos, now without courage, started running without thinking. Anna followed, but João hesitated. Something in those empty eyes had paralyzed him, as if he knew it wasn't over yet. He looked once more to where the girl had pointed, and then he saw it. Something was moving there in the shadows. A tall, undefined silhouette, getting closer with heavy steps. It was as if the very ground began to tremble, and João felt the earth opening beneath his feet. When he tried to run, the air grew dense, and the sound of a low laugh echoed through the forest. Carlos and Anna were ahead, but stopped when they heard something behind them. João was in panic, but before he could scream, the trees began closing around him, blocking his path. He was trapped, and the silhouette in front of him was getting closer and closer. He tried to break free, but something was pulling him to the ground, as if the very roots of the forest were grabbing him. "João!" Anna screamed, but he couldn't move anymore. And then, everything went black. When they woke up, it was already daytime. They were at the edge of the forest, far from the house and the area where they had found the diary. But something had changed. They couldn't remember exactly how they had gotten out of the forest, but they knew something had helped them, or rather, something had freed them. The three of them were sweaty and exhausted, with lost looks, as if what they had experienced was real, but at the same time unreachable. They never spoke about that night again, and they never returned to that place. However, every time they passed by a forest, the echo of a whisper, soft and distant, still seemed to follow them. In the days that followed, the feeling that something was wrong didn't go away. João, Carlos, and Anna tried to get back to their routines, but their nights were filled with nightmares of Isabel's pale face and the whispers they could never identify. Every time they closed their eyes, the sounds seemed to get louder, as if Isabel's presence was still chasing them. But the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, Carlos received a mysterious phone call. When he answered, a soft and distorted voice, almost a whisper, said only one word: "Come back." He tried to call back, but the number was unknown, and the call had disappeared without a trace. Desperate, he called João and Anna, telling them what had happened. They were starting to convince themselves that what happened that night in the forest wasn't just a panic-induced illusion. Something had been awakened, something that was still lurking, waiting. They decided to return to the forest, hoping to put the nightmare to rest once and for all. It wasn't an easy decision, but they knew that if they didn't, the whispers, visions, and nightmares would never stop. That night, when they got close to the house, the feeling was oppressive. The forest was darker than ever, and the air felt heavier. They walked in silence, the shadows around them seeming to move almost consciously, as if the trees were watching. When they arrived at the house, what they found there was even more disturbing. The door was open, as if someone was waiting for them. But inside, there were no signs of life, only the echo of footsteps from someone who had long since left. And then the whispers began again. Thank you for watching another Dark Tales video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any scary stories. See you next time, and beware of the dark.